And so we finally get to the end of this book, Biblical Hebrew for the Novice. And the final chapter has to do with different genres. Now, it's not about genres per se. That would be more of an interpretation book. We want to look at some of the Hebrew things that are particular to the genres, not too much depth, but just some things to give you a taste, to make you want some more. I do have a course, by the way, that is in learning Hebrew inductively through the book of Jonah on Udemy. And most of the videos are also on YouTube if you hunt and peck for them. But the whole course is assembled together on Udemy, and it goes through all of Hebrew grammar. But this is a concise Biblical Hebrew for the novice, a concise overview using the tools. And so what are some things about genres in the Old Testament that we might want to know as a beginner, as a overview for Hebrew? Well, let's look. Well, first of all, let's talk about narrative. That's story. And quite a bit of the Old Testament is story, Genesis through Second Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther. Yeah, that whole section is pretty much narrative. That's an awful lot of the Old Testament, at least half, I would say. And so story is very common. Here, I've given you an example from Genesis 1:3, which you may know. And God said, "Let light be," and light was. And so we've seen some of these pieces, but here in the final chapter, we're finally getting some sentences. Thank you. What I wanted to draw your attention to is this. Can you pronounce it? Vayomer. Vayomer is, and he said. It's very common in the Old Testament because God speaks a lot and other people say stuff too. Notice that the subject usually comes after the verb. Some other things here. This is adjussive. Let it be, let it be. That's not how that song goes, by the way. But anyway, it's a verb. It's a command. Let it be. Let light be. Subject comes after the verb. Third masculine singular because light is a he, she, or it. Of course, I think it's actually a she in Hebrew. I might be wrong on that. Look it up. Go to interlinearbible.org, Genesis 1:3, and it will tell you what the gender. Well, actually, it's third masculine singular. So I was wrong. It's masculine. Answer my own question. Or yehi or, let light be. Vayehi or, and it was. Consecutive imperfect here, where you've got an imperfect in a chain, but here it's past tense. This is also a consecutive imperfect, so it's a past tense as well. We call that a converted imperfect sometimes, or a vav consecutive, you might call it, a wow consecutive. Okay, what I wanted to point out, though, is vayomer. Vayomer is a verb. It is a converted imperfect, or a vav, wow consecutive, or a wayiktol, sometimes it's called. We've talked about that in the past. It's a true past tense. And he said. And you see that a lot in narrative. So I just wanted to point out this form because you see it a lot in narrative. You see converted imperfects a lot in narrative. Some also I talk about in this chapter names that have God in them. This is interesting. So Eliyahu is Elijah, and it actually has both El, the generic word for God, and Yahu at the end, which is short for Yahweh. So this means Yahweh is my God. Very fitting for Elijah, right? Elijah was very zealous for Yahweh and fought against the prophets of Baal. So it's only fitting that his name would be Yahweh is my God. Comes from a family of Yahwists, apparently. Here's another one. Immanuel. Can you hear what that is? Emmanuel. It is El, God, is Im, with, Nu, us. So it's Im is with, Nu is us, and El is God. So God is with us, Emmanuel. Here's another one. Zid ki Yahu, Zedekiah. And the Yahu at the end is Yahweh. And Zedek means righteous. So Yahweh is righteous. So that's what Zedekiah's name means. Now here's one that it draws attention to the fact that Saul may very well have had some spiritual issues because this is Esh Baal, and it is a man of Baal. Well, that's not a good name, is it? Because I think actually there's another name given to him also, a cover up of the fact that Saul probably may have named him something with Baal in it, or at least he was a man of Baal at some point in his life. Not good. It's not good. But here are some examples of names with God in them, and I put that in the section on narrative in the Old Testament. Let's talk just briefly about the law. I was trying to think, okay, what would be a good law-related, genre-related grammar item. I didn't put im. Im means if. So case law, if your ox gores somebody, then do this. Im could be used. That's the proper word for if. In this case, key is used. Key is a preposition that means that or for normally, but it also is sometimes used in case law, casuistic law. And that should gore an ox, the man, stoning you will stone the ox. Here's this infinitive absolute. Remember how it intensifies the verb sometimes. This is a plain old imperfect. It's a nifal or an n stem. The n has been assimilated because nun assimilates, so no vowel separates. You don't need to know that, but if you want to take the Learning Hebrew Inductively course through the book of Jonah, you'll see some n stems, some nifals in there. And that this is a doubled samic from a nun that has assimilated into the samic. But stoning you will stone, that's all stuff we learned in the infinitive chapter. This is the direct object marker, et. We've seen that earlier on, small words. Ish is the word for man. Shore, that's an ox. And then this one is also a first nun. This is one of those weak verbs where the first letter is weak, and here it got assimilated into the gimel. You don't need to know all that stuff because the code tells me it's imperfect and that it's third masculine singular. And if you were on interlinearbible.org, it would also tell you what the word was. But what I wanted to point out here is this key. This is unusual. It's something like, and that an ox should gore a man. But sometimes this was, Hebrews languages do whatever they want to do. And so here's an example of where instead of the proper or normal word for if, we've got the word that. Don't ask questions, just know that it can happen. And of course, if you're looking at interlinearbible.org, you're going to have a translation under it, so it will tell you what it means. Poetry. Hebrew poetry doesn't rhyme sounds, it rhymes thought. For example, synonymous poetry says it and says it again. And this is an example of synonymous poetry. Create for me a clean heart, O God, and make new a right spirit within me. If you know that song, it's parallelism. Create a clean heart, renew a right spirit. Synonymous, or not exactly the same, but similar. And so here we have a heart clean, create for me, God. Create here is an imperative. It's a call or a G stem, second masculine singular, because it's asking God, who's second, God is a you, and putatively male. Not literally male, because he doesn't have the equipment, but that's not important right now. And then you have a parallel statement that's roughly synonymous next. And a ruach, or wo ruach, and a spirit being established, make new in me. Here's another imperative. This is a D stem imperative. You've got doubled second letter, PL. And then this is a participle, a nifal. Nifal is misspelled, but that's what interlinearbible.org does. Fine. I guess it's not really misspelled, but that's not the dominant way it would be spelled in the Hebrew literature. But it is a nifal tends to be passive, so it's being established, a spirit having been or being established, a right spirit, an established spirit, a being established spirit. But anyway, the ing comes from the participle. It's masculine singular because it goes with spirit, and spirit is apparently masculine singular. Anyway, okay, so there's the synonymous poetry. There is also antithetical parallelism, where you say it and you say the opposite. There's also synthetic, where you say it and you build, or you say it and you step. Different kinds of synthetic parallelism and everything else. But I wanted to give you a little taste of what's in this chapter. If you want to know more, read the chapter. in my book, Biblical Hebrew for the Novice, or take the course on Udemy, which you probably are if you're watching this video, but you might be watching it on YouTube as well. A final example from prophecy. Hine means behold, so you see that in prophecy. You can see it other places as well. Days coming, we have to insert are in there. Days are coming, but it's just yamim ba'im here. There is no is. This is an example of a participle being used like a present tense. Days coming, although here it's actually future, isn't it? Days are coming, but a participle being used like a verb or predicative use. If you watch the participle video, behold, days are coming, says the Lord, Na'um Yahweh. Literally, it's something like oracle of Yahweh, but it's usually translated as says the Lord. Sometimes it is literally says the Lord with the verb amar, which means to say. But sometimes you'll see this idiom, oracle of Yahweh, but it translates best in English as says the Lord or says Yahweh. Well, there's just a taste of some of the Hebrew particulars that show up in some of the different genres of the Old Testament. And now we're done. We're done with Biblical Hebrew for the Novice.